Saul was an interesting king. Now, things didn't end up well for Saul. It seems that his kingship deteriorated fairly quickly. And I think there are some interesting lessons that we can learn from Saul, oftentimes in the negative sense, right? But what I want to do today is I want to look at one of the examples that we see in the life of Saul and apply it to our own lives and maybe wonder if sometimes we do something similar. So what we're going to do is we're going to look over at the book of Samuel, 1 Samuel chapter 14 and starting in verse 24. And it says, "The men of Israel had been hard pressed that day. So Saul had laid an oath on the people, saying, 'Cursed be the man who eats food until it is evening, and I am avenged on my enemies.' So none of the people tasted food." You know, this sounds like it's coming from a place of self-centeredness, doesn't it? It seems like it's coming from a place of Saul maybe more worried about himself than his own people. And so this is not a good place for this to come from. Verse 25, "Now when all the people came to the forest, behold, there was honey on the ground. And when the people entered the forest, behold, the honey was dropping. But no one put his hand to his mouth, for the people feared the oath." I want you to imagine that you get done running, or you get done doing some kind of strenuous activity, and you are so thirsty. And you know that feeling. That feeling when your throat's really dry and you can barely talk, right? And yet, there's this cup of water right in front of you. And yet you're told you're not allowed to drink it. Imagine being that close. Or imagine not eating for the whole day, and then at the end of the day, somebody puts a sirloin steak in front of you, and you're told, don't eat it. That would be tough, wouldn't it? It would kill your spirits, right? And I think we're seeing the same thing here. Now here's the issue. Jonathan had not heard his father charge the people with an oath, so he put out the tip of a staff that was in his hand and dipped it in the honeycomb and put his hand to his mouth, and his eyes became bright. Then one of the people said, "Your father strictly charged the people with an oath, saying, 'Cursed be the man who eats food this day,' and the people were faint." Then Jonathan said, "My father has troubled the land. See how my eyes have become bright because I tasted a little of this honey? How much better if the people had eaten freely today of the spoil of their enemies that they found. For now the defeat among the Philistines has not been great." So, let's talk about this a little bit. Let's talk about this negative example that we're given by Saul, about someone not doing it right. I want you to think about, have you ever said something that was rash? I think we all have. Have you ever been, as a parent or as a grandparent or as an employer or a manager or even a coworker, been overly strict with the people that you work with, or your kids or your grandkids? We may all have at some point, right? And I wonder sometimes if this comes from a place of self-seeking and self-service. So, for example, we might think, my kids are going to make me look bad. Or, what will people think of me if this happens? So we have to be careful, because this can create a lot of problems, right? Rashness often leads to overlooking common sense and ignoring the big picture. Being overly strict to the point of unreasonable can often lead to frustration, pain, and hurt. In fact, fathers are told not to provoke their children to wrath in Ephesians chapter 6 and verse 4. And when we're overly strict, that can lead to that. It can lead to our kids being angry and wrathful. So, as parents, grandparents, managers, co-workers, let's not be rash and unreasonable. This leads to pain and frustration in our families, our jobs, and in our own hearts. Instead, let's be contemplative. Let's be quick to hear, slow to speak, and let's be judging with a righteous judgment, as we read in John chapter 7 and verse 24. Let's not judge by appearances, but let's judge with a right judgment. Saul was rash, and he was overly strict in a way that he shouldn't have been. So, are we going to be more like that? Or are we going to be more like Jesus? So, as we're going throughout the day, let's be gentle with those around us. And let's remember that there's a big picture that we have to keep in the forefront of our minds. I hope you have a great day. Let's learn to be more like Jesus. Love you guys. We'll see you later.